Muy buenos días. Soy la doctora Mara
Good
Gómez
morning,
y
I am
tengo
Dr.
el
Mara
gran honor de
Gomez,
darles
and it
la
is
bienvenida
my
al
honor and my
segundo
pleasure to
día de
welcome you to the
actividades
second day of
de
activities
la novena
of the
conferencia
9th
Ibero-Americana sobre
Ibero-American
justicia
Conference
electoral,
on Electoral
nuevas tendencias
Justice,
para
new
asegurar
trends
equidad
to
en la contienda
guarantee
electoral en
equality
Iberoamérica.
in the
Daremos
elections in
inicio al
Ibero-America.
quinto
We will
panel
start with the
titulado
fifth
La
panel
igualdad de
called
género en la justicia
Gender
electoral.
Equality in
Me permito
Electoral
presentarles
Justice. I
a
would
los
like
integrantes
to
del panel.
introduce
En
the
primer
members of the
lugar,
panel.
les presento a
First of
Miriam
all,
Concepción
Miriam
Crisaldo,
Concepción Crisaldo,
magistrada de la segunda sala del Tribunal
Magistrate of the
Electoral
Second
de la
Chamber of
capital
the
de
Electoral
Paraguay.
Tribunal of the Capital from Paraguay.
Contamos también con la presencia de Luz
We
de Los
also have
Ángeles
here Luz de Los Ángeles
Chinchilla,
Retana Chinchilla,
magistrada suplente del Tribunal Supremo
alternate
de Elecciones
magistrate of
de
the
Costa Rica.
Electoral Tribunal of Costa Rica.
Se encuentra también Julio Olivo Granadino,
Also
magistrado
Julio
presidente del
Olivio
Tribunal
Granadino,
Supremo Electoral de El
Chief
Salvador.
Magistrate of the Electoral Tribunal of El Salvador.
Y para presidir este panel
And
nos
chairing
acompaña
this
María de
panel, we
Lourdes
have María de Lourdes
González
González Prieto,
directora del programa en
Director of the
Paraguay
program
de
in
IDEA
Paraguay for International IDEA.
Cedo ahora con mucho gusto
I will now
el micrófono a
gladly
la
give the
presidenta
floor
del panel.
to
Adelante.
Madam Chair.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días
Thank you very much.
a todas, a todos.
Good morning,
Muy,
ladies and
muy
gentlemen.
contenta de estar,
I'm very
nuevamente
happy
con este
to
honor de
be
presidir este
here once
panel
again
el día
chairing
de hoy.
another panel
Y creo que
today.
después de la jornada
And
que
I think
tuvimos
that
ayer,
after
fue muy
yesterday's
productiva. Creo
working
que
day,
todos
well, it was a very
salimos
productive day.
con
I
muchas
think we
ideas,
all
con muchas,
left the building with
perspectivas de qué podemos seguir haciendo.
many
Y,
ideas, many new
este
perspectives of what
panel
we
es
can
particularmente
continue to do. And
importante,
this
es el
panel is
panel
particularly
temático que
important. It's the
tendremos el día de
only
hoy.
whole
Con este
panel that we will
cerraremos los
have today,
trabajos,
and with this we will
sustantivos
be
de la
closing the
conferencia para
main
dar paso a,
works, the main activities of
a
the
la
conference,
discusión de las,
so we can proceed
de los acuerdos, de las
afterwards
conclusiones
with the
que
agreements and
emitiremos
the
en
conclusions
esta
that will be
edición de esta
drafted
conferencia
in
iberoamericana.
this
Además,
Ibero-American
el nivel
conference.
del panel que me toca presidir
And the
es
level of the panel that I am
especialmente
chairing,
relevante, así que
it
de
is
verdad
quite
es un honor, un
significant, so it
privilegio
is
estar
really
aquí
an honor
con
and a
ustedes.
privilege for me to be here.
No voy a tomar mucho tiempo para hacer
I
una
won't
introducción
take
temática,
too
puesto
long.
que
I would
ayer se
just like to
apuntaron
make a
varias
brief
de las
introduction
líneas de lo
because
que
yesterday
podría
we
ser
already talked
una
about some
guía
of
para
the
nuestra reflexión.
the
Solamente quiero
guidelines
dar
for
algunas
our reflection. I
cifras
just
para
want to
ubicar
give
un
you
poco
some
el tema en
figures to
perspectiva
provide
en
some
la región, en
context and
Iberoamérica.
perspective in the region in Ibero-America.
17 países han instrumentado
17 countries
mecanismos
have
de acción
put in
afirmativa para
place
incrementar la
affirmative action
participación de
mechanisms
mujeres en
to
las listas
increase the
electorales,
participation
entre
of women
ellos
in
también
the
está
voters'
España.
lists.
7
Spain is one of
países
them.
de nuestra
7
región ya han
countries in our
aprobado la
region have
paridad.
already approved
Bolivia, Costa Rica,
equality.
Ecuador,
Bolivia, Costa Rica,
España,
Ecuador,
México,
Spain, Mexico, Honduras,
y Nicaragua.
and Nicaragua.
Hay importantes avances
There are
normativos, y
important
eso es para
regulatory,
felicitarse,
there is important
pero
regulatory progress that
persisten
has been
graves
achieved that's
desigualdades
important, but
estructurales,
there are still
así
some
como
important
inequidades en
structural
política y, sobre
inequality
todo,
and
persistencia
also
de la
political
violencia de
inequality,
género.
and there is still
Cierto
a lot
es
of
que el
gender-based
continente
violence.
americano ocupa
It is
el
true
primer
that the
lugar a
Americas
nivel
is
mundial
number
con
one worldwide with
28.2% de mujeres
28.2% women
parlamentarias, pero
in
esto no llega
parliaments,
ni siquiera
but this
al
doesn't even
30%
reach
que ha sido señalado
30%,
como
which
por
has
los
been
expertos como
specified
la
by
masa
experts
crítica
as the
necesaria
critical
para que
mass
se
that is
logre un
necessary
cambio con
to achieve
perspectiva
a
durable y
true
sostenible.
sustainable change.
Persisten grandes brechas de
There
género
are
en los
still
partidos
great
políticos. Y el
gender-based
dato
gaps
más
in political
preocupante de
parties,
todos,
and the most
14 de los
concerning fact of
25
all is that
países del
14
mundo
of the
con
25
tasas más
countries of the
elevadas de
region,
feminicidio y violencia
sorry,
de
in the
género
world
están
with
en
the
América
highest
Latina.
rate
Este es un
of
tema
gender-based
que
violence
nos
are in
preocupa
Latin America.
y nos
So
interpela
this
a
is
todas las
something
personas
that
que
is a
trabajamos en
concern
el
for
desarrollo
us,
democrático.
especially for us who work in developing
Una vez
democracy.
hecha
Well, after
puntualización sobre algunas
this brief
cifras
introduction
que
and
debemos tener en mente,
regarding
tengo
some
mucho gusto
some
entonces en
figures,
dar
I
la
am
palabra
happy to
a
now
la
give the
primera de
floor
nuestras,
to the first
panelistas.
of our panel
Vamos
members,
a
of
dar,
our
10
speakers.
minutos a cada
Each person will
panelista.
have 10
Vamos a
minutes.
tener que ser en esta ocasión sí muy
This
estrictos con
time
el
we will
control
have
del
to be
tiempo
very
porque,
stringent with
tenemos,
time control
el espacio
because
limitado y tenemos
we
más trabajo
don't
que
have a
hacer
lot of time and
como-
we have
como
a lot of
grupo.
things to do
Así
afterwards as a
que,
group
pedimos en
after
primer
each
lugar
presentation.
a
So
la magistrada
now I
del
would like
Tribunal Supremo de
to
Elecciones de
ask
Costa Rica, Luz de Los Ángeles
Luz de Los Ángeles Retana
hacer uso de la
Chinchilla,
palabra. Muchas
alternate
gracias.
magistrate of the Electoral Tribunal of Costa Rica, to
Muy
address the
buenos
audience.
días a todos y
Good
todas.
morning. Ladies and gentlemen,
lógicamente agradecer a
of
los
course, I would like to
organizadores del
thank
evento.
the organizers of the
Estamos
event.
muy orgullosos,
We are
orgullosas
very
de estar,
proud of
discutiendo temas
of
de
discussing
relevancia por la
relevant
democracia
topics
en el mundo.
regarding
Me
democracy in the
corresponde
world.
hacer
I
un breve
will
análisis
now
de dos
conduct a brief
sentencias
analysis
que
of
el
two
tribunal
rulings
ha
issued by
dictado
the
en materia de género
tribunal
en Costa Rica.
when it comes
Como
to
bien lo
which are
apuntaba
gender-based
Lourdes, Costa
issues.
Rica
And like
está
Lourdes was
entre los
saying,
países
Costa
que ya
Rica is
está
one of the
con el
countries that
50%
already has
de
50%
participación en materia de género.
participation
Tiene que haber equilibrio. La
in
primera de nuestras
gender-based matters. The first of our
bueno,
rulings.
esto es una guía. Yo
Well,
no
this
voy
is just
a leer
I'm not gonna
estilo
read
karaoke, pero
just like if I was singing
pero sí
karaoke,
pretendo que por lo
but
menos tengan una
I
guía
would just like to
ustedes,
give you
necesaria
some
para
guidelines
entender lo que
so
vamos a
you can
explicar.
understand what I'm going
Esta
to
primera
explain.
sentencia es
This
la
first
necesaria
ruling
coordinación que debe
is
haber
the
entre el
necessary
principio de
coordination
igualdad
that there
por
must
género y el
exist
principio
between the
democrático.
democratic principle and
Según el ordenamiento jurídico
the
costarricense,
gender
en la
equality
Constitución Política, en su
principle.
artículo
The
98
Constitution
y el
in the
Código
Article
Electoral,
98
en su
and the
artículo
Electoral Code in
67,
its
pues
Article
así lo confirman.
67,
Entonces, un
it
partido
confirms what I just
político,
mentioned. So a political party
tiene que tener en las
must
asambleas
have
internas y en
in
todos los
its
procesos de
internal
escogencia de
meetings and
candidatos
in all its
la
internal
exigencia de la
processes,
paridad.
it must
Tiene
have
que
that gender
regularlo en
equality
sus
or parity.
estatutos, porque
It
si
has
no,
to be regulated
finalmente,
in their
las
bylaws.
candidaturas no son inscritas
Otherwise,
si no vienen
the
con paridad.
candidates are not enrolled if they are
Este
not
partido,
equal,
¿verdad?
if they don't
Cuenta
have
con
that
una
equality.
asamblea
This
plenaria
political
ampliada,
party has
en donde
full assembly, a full meeting, where the
que se genera
participation that
por
is
la dinámica
generated
democrática es muy probable
by
que vaya
the
a salir
democratic
desequilibrada en
dynamics
el tema de género.
might
Pero
be
entonces se le da
unbalanced
al partido la
gender-wise.
potestad
So
para que
we gave
el comité
or the political party
ejecutivo del
had
partido
the
o el
power so that
candidato
the
a la
candidate
presidencia de la
or the
República,
executive
si
committee
ya
of the
lo
political
había,
party
pudiera completar
could
y ampliar esa asamblea plenaria
broaden that
donde se
meeting,
escogen los
that
candidatos a
full meeting,
diputados que
where they
finalmente
choose the
tienen que ser
candidates to run
aprobados por una asamblea
for the
nacional
House
del
of
partido.
Representatives
Y
that need to be
entonces,
approved by a
de
national
verdad,
assembly of the
resulta
party.
que en
So
esta
the
asamblea
truth
plenaria
is
hay un
that in
desequilibrio
this
y falta
plenary assembly
un
there is an
25% de
unbalance, and
mujeres
there
para equilibrar la
we need
fórmula.
25% more
muy
women to
sencillo,
balance
el
out the
candidato
formula. So it's very simple,
designa
really. The
53
candidate
mujeres a
appointed
dedo.
53 women.
Y don Daniel
Just
sabe bien
the
el
ones
cuento porque se
he
relaciona
wanted,
bien
and
con
Mr.
nuestro
Daniel
país.
knows about
Escoge
this
a la
case.
esposa de él,
He
a la
chose
esposa del
his
jefe de
wife,
campaña, a
the
la
wife
esposa de
of
todos los
his
candidatos a
campaign
diputados,
manager,
y
the
así
wife of all
completa el 25% que le
the
hacía
candidates for
falta.
representative, and
Entonces,
that's
una
how he got the other
precandidata diputada
25%.
se
So
siente
a
lesionada
pre-candidate,
sus derechos
that
políticos
a
y
madam pre-candidate
presenta ante el tribunal
presented or submitted or filed before
recurso
the
de amparo
tribunal
electoral.
an electoral.
Por supuesto que el
amparo.
tribunal lo acoge,
Of course,
anula
the
esa asamblea
tribunal
plenaria y obliga
voided or
al-
cancelled that
obliga al-
assembly, that full
al
assembly that was
partido
created by the political party,
a
and
convocar
it
a la
forced the
Asamblea
party
Nacional que le tocaba
to
ratificar los
call
candidatos
for
a
a
diputado
national
y
assembly,
escoger en esa asamblea
and
todos los
for that
candidatos a
assembly
diputado con la fórmula
they would have
democrática
to
donde
use the
cada una
democratic
de las
formula where each
personas
one
que va a
of the
participar
persons that
tiene
will
que haber
take
sido
part
escogido y
would
procesada
have been
con
to
participación
be chosen
legítima, ¿verdad?
by
Y no a dedo.
legitimate
Entonces,
participation and
se le
not
obliga al
just
partido a hacer una reingeniería de esos
choosing by
estatutos
one person.
y reformarlo
So
de tal manera que
the
esto no vuelva a
bylaws were
suceder
amended so
porque
that
era
this
una
doesn't happen
injusticia
again, because
para
it
las
was
militantes del
extremely
partido que se
unfair
habían
for
pasado
the
por
members of the
todo el
political party that
proceso,
had gone through in the
¿verdad?
entire process
Pasar de asambleas distritales,
from
cantonales,
district level,
provinciales para llegar a una
municipal
nacional
level,
y
and
que al
state
final
level
a dedo
assemblies to
escojan a
get
la
to
esposa del
the national
candidato.
assembly, and then
O
the wife of the
cualquiera, el
candidate was just
asistente o lo que fuera,
appointed
pero cercana al
randomly.
candidato.
or assistant or whomever it was. So that's the first ruling. Now the second ruling is regarding horizontal parity or equality. In Costa Rica, the legislator approves the new electoral code in 2009, which bounds the political parties for the following. If the leader is a man, the second candidate has to be a woman, and so on. But for the national level political parties, this didn't happen because the legislator decided so, that they didn't have that liability, that obligation of alternating by province, and we have 7 provinces. So if the capital was led by a man, then the next province would have been or should have been led by a woman, but the legislator didn't include this in the legislation, so the tribunal had to rule on this fact and had to respect the spirit of the legislator, because that's what they had in mind. But there was an internal movement between a woman representative, and she presented an amparo remedy before an unconstitutionality proceeding, because it was very strange here, because there was a conflict with the constitutional chamber, because this chamber, what they did is they declared, they revoked the rulings from the electoral tribunal when we ruled respecting the spirit of the legislator. So this is not a competence of the constitutional chamber. What they had to do is they had to declare that article of the electoral code as unconstitutional, that didn't allow that horizontal parity. So the electoral tribunal, we didn't have a greater conflict with the constitutional chamber, and basing ourselves on what the political constitution grants us as a power, we reinterpreted Article 48 of the electoral code, and we demanded the parties that for national level political parties, they have to have this gender-based alternance. So they have to do it in whichever way they can do it, but all the formulas have to have this alternation. This doesn't really solve that problem, that alternance problem, because there are a lot of regional or provincial level political parties where we cannot really demand a lot except for the vertical parity, just the horizontal one. But it has been a way of solving it so that the national level political parties can really reformulate and present the candidates with that alternation. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them later on, but in this coming election we will hold in February 2018, that's when we will really know if this new requirement of the tribunal will help to provide more balance in the popular representation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Magistrate Retana, for your presentation, and you had 1 minute left, so I appreciate your discipline. So now I will give the floor to Magistrate Miriam Cristaldo from the Electoral Tribunal of Paraguay.
Muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for allowing me to be here with you and sharing this information for a few minutes. She's speaking a dialect. She's not speaking Spanish right now.
Están que se vuelven locos.
You killed all the translators. You don't know what the.
Al director,
I was saying that I would like to thank the translators and my the director of IDEA, Mr. Richard, understood what I said because he is familiar with our language because he was with us for a long time. So I will not only talk about women because Lourdes asked me to talk a little bit about all the things that we are doing in order to reduce the barriers that hinder the participation of people with disabilities, in order to access or in order for these people to have the right to vote. And in 2015, in the municipal elections, we had the accessible vote. That's what we called it for the first time. And we will have the same for our general elections of 2018. So we have a table or a meeting, an advisory meeting, where we have volunteers that are trained so that they can help people with disabilities. So there is Braille language with a magnifying glass and also audio and visual material for people that have visual or hearing disabilities. Regarding people with visual disabilities, we have this Braille template. We have for people with total and partial disabilities that can go to the dark room with a person they trust. We have the use of magnifying glasses for people that need it, that can be requested in this advisory table. These advisory tables have also audiovisual material with sign language. This person we see here in this video is an official of our institute that by using sign language, he translates whatever is said within the tribunal, in the events of the tribunal, into sign language. The polling stations, they are already and also trained based on the disability of the person that approaches them, so they can address that. We also have the ergonomic adapter for the pen in case they have some kind of motor-based disability. We also have, we have also innovated with the accessible table, which is the one that is in the polling station, because we have also worked to have voting booths that are accessible, with, especially for wheelchairs. There is also a dark room that is exactly at the height for a person that would be sitting on a wheelchair, and it is also wheelchair accessible. We have also implemented the vote from home format. In 2015, we implemented in the municipal elections in some districts, and for 2018 we have extended this use. In that image we can see a person that was an intermediary with in the elections for Club Olympia. This person has sclerosis, and he's a member of the club, and he wanted to vote for the president of his club. So for the first time, this was done for the first time, and the lady you see here is our director for electoral services that works here, Dr. Daisy Llano. And I would like to say that the person you see here with Down syndrome, who is being helped, that is my son. He's also from Club Olympia. The accessible vote is being implemented. it is being implemented in a way. I mean, there is a timeline within the electoral timeline where they have to specify that they would like to use that service. Then they go with a person from the institution, a social worker, and a physician in order to verify the kind of disability. And then that assistance is authorized, and then a convoy is sent in order to help these people during the elections. We also have an inclusive web page where we have a brighter screen, more letters or larger print, and we have received an award for electoral transparency for having an inclusive page in our web page. Now, regarding the main topic of this panel, we can say that we, due to a special circumstance in 2009, late 2008, early 2009, one of our members stopped working with us. So I was the first woman that was a member of our tribunal, and we started for about a year and a half, very tepidly, just in one office, so that when we wanted to centralize the statistical data that were requested. And so we started growing, and in 2014 we created the Unity for the Political Participation of Women by resolution of the Electoral Tribunal in order to develop policies to promote and empower women, to monitor and the scope of the same. And also we work together with different organizations, different government and non-government organizations on this topic. Afterwards, we have conducted several studies and works. We have held successful promotion campaigns with PNUD and UN Women, and we have also had dialogue tables with political parties, also successful experiences with the media, with journalists, in order to promote political rights. We have also held workshops with UN Women for the elections that already passed in order to have more women candidates for the municipal elections. That was for 2010. Also promoting the political participation of women. And we have also held a very specific project called Knowing Our Women, that I will talk a little bit about it later on. We have also had workshops called Building Women Citizens in different places in our country. We have also held workshops for cultural stereotypes and gender perspective leadership with the Supreme Court and other different government and non-government organizations. We have also held the bridge workshops with International IDEA. This is internally in order to train our officials, and that's what we have been doing. I think that we are doing something very interesting. I know it is not something that is the core of our duties, but I think that with time we have also done a good job there. So now I would like to show you a video. In order to promote the women participation in politics, we have the project Knowing Our Women Authorities. This project is meant to be a tool to strengthen the democracy in order to strengthen the participation of women in the politics. It also needs to helps us to know the weaks and the strengths of women and the hindrances they face when trying to hold public office. So no one will give us a room, especially in politics. We have to earn it, we have to work for it, and we conquer it. If we are going to wait for them to give us room just because we are women, that won't happen. We have to stop playing the victims, and we must prove that we are capable. We have the capability of doing several things at the same time, of multitasking. And if we're able to do that, we will be more able to build a government from politics. But above all, we have to trust ourselves, and let's not just ask for things, but let's demand things based on our work. The execution of this project is done through personal interviews to a group of representatives locally and federally, and also for women who hold public office, in order to have an instrument that is a guideline for women that want to participate actively in politics. She's speaking some kind of a different language that's not Spanish now. The experience of each one of our interviewees strengthens this project in order to have more women participate in the politics of our country. I would like to encourage women, the wives, the sisters, the neighbors, all the women in their country, to look for the space that they deserve. Struggle and you will succeed. Without sacrifice, there's no victory, there's no wins. And this victory will be achieved by everything that you do every day. Asking for respect and looking for the well-being of for yourself and also for other people. You are a woman, and you need to be convinced that you are worthy. Knowing our women authorities is a project implemented by the Electoral Justice of Paraguay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Magistrate Cristaldo, for your presentation, and now we will go immediately to the third panel member, Dr. Julio Libo Granadino, Chief Magistrate of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal of El Salvador.
Good morning to all of you. I am going to use the minute that the magistrate left free in order to greet you and to say our panelists, say hello, and to thank you for and appreciate all your contribution for this kind of event to the magistrates of the Electoral Tribunal of the Federal Judiciary and the international community that we have with us. Some of them are the gurus of electoral law in the world. So I have worked on a more in-depth framework, a historical framework, then some basic concepts and then some conclusions, but I would like to limit my presentation due to time constraints. Nevertheless, we need to reflect on several things that are important. I would like to tell you that in the case of El Salvador, we can say that there is a previous, a before and an after moment from January 16, 1992. Before, it was not probable to speak about the affirmation of the rights and of all the citizens if we didn't have, for example, an ombudsman who was able to guard and promote human rights in a general manner. So we had this armed conflict which stopped in 1992, finished in 1992. So as of the signature of the peace agreement, we created this General Office for Human Rights that is going to guard these human rights as a conquer of these peace agreements. Afterwards, in 1993, we passed the Family Code, which is an innovation in the world because we we took that Napoleonic Code, which was the basis to form this new one and to issue this new one, with the rights of the family included, and there is an article, Article 36, which contemplates the equality of rights between men and women. In 1996, we also created the Women Development Institute for El Salvador, where we developed a whole policy to protect women's rights in my country, and with a climate that was completely polarized, and the left became a political party, and they run office during two different administrations. Nevertheless, we decided to create a parliamentary group of women in order to provide this power, this drive, this real drive to promote women's rights and to make them participate in politics. We also approved the law of equality and eradication of discrimination against women, having a free life of violence life for women. So this is a framework so that I am for my topic, which is electoral justice. But logistically, I am not going to be able to project it to you. Now, regarding electoral justice, I would like to tell you that in 2013, this was approved with all these amendments, framework and political movements framework, and all these activities of women in El Salvador, and I think in the world also expanded a lot. Now, regarding gender justice, we approve this, where we are regulating for the first time after the Constitution of 1950, where for the first time we are regulating the right to vote of women in my country, and we start seeing this with the first election of representatives, 3 representatives in 1956, and up to date in the political parties laws, we approved a participation quota, a real participation quota, political participation of women in charge of the representations of different areas in the local governments. So we approved the quota of 30%. We haven't really reached the equality or the parity. We call the parity this vote, the braided vote, where we have women and men in all the positions. We have not reached that. In Article number 3 of the Constitution since 1950, up to date, until the Constitution of 1983, we have regulated equality of rights between men and women. Nevertheless, this 30% as a minimum, and I have set this in a very specific my point of view is that I don't agree in setting minimums. So today we set a minimum quota of women. So we want to respect and to comply with these minimum amounts. Nevertheless, we should set out that there are no maximums, but not to set minimums. And that we might have 50% of women, and men should become a minority. So, in the political party laws, we said that we have a 30%. So how are we going to make real this? Because at the end of the day, regarding rights and rights affirmations, we talk a lot, but really these rights have to be materialized. So how is that we, as a high electoral tribunal, are going to set out these rights for women? Well, I would like to to tell you that this 30% is real. First of all, because we trained people, we educated people, and we educated all the electoral bodies, in this case, in the departments or regions that we have in our country, and they enroll certain amount of people, and they have the maximum authority in this subject matter. So we have educated all these bodies and institutions. And besides, in order to guarantee to respect this quota, we have designed an IT system which allows us to set out, based on a registration or a registry of people, which is the National Registry of Individuals in my country, where we have every women and men registered. In this system, if an electoral authority is not enrolling the percentage that the political party is submitting, and if the political party is wanting to breach the system, then an alert is issued from the IT system. So we are preventing the political party so that they comply with the women's quota that they have. And this goes for the representations for the Legislative Assembly, which in our case is 84. Also for the municipalities, which are the local governments. Maybe you have heard that our country has one of the most complex electoral systems in the world. And this is the opinion of different countries. Because the chamber of the Constitution of the Supreme Court of Justice has this fractionated vote, but at the same time we have a plurality in the case of the municipal councils. We have a list of winners and a list of losers, and we call it A and B lists. When we have the holders or the chiefs and the alternate members, and we also have this B list where in some way we need to respect this affirmation of the rights of women. So as you can see, this is a very complex system where we have tried to give this jurisprudential line, where basically what we have done is to repeat or to reiterate or to enforce what is stated in the political parties law in such a way that all the parties have to comply with this quota. Or if they are not willing to comply with it, they cannot pass through our system if they haven't complied with this 30% of percentage of women. And the electoral results of women that are enrolled or were enrolled in 2015 in our parliament, for example, we presented some lists that we had the 41% of these political parties that are enrolled, 38% of holders, and the other percentage of alternates. So we have had this affirmation of rights where we have more women in the Legislative Assembly and in the municipalities by respecting this quota of the 30% that has gone above this percentage. Thank you very much, Dr. Olivo, for your presentation. We have heard already 3 different presentations, but it seems to me that they are very comprehensive. We have heard from Costa Rica how they are progressing in the application of equality. Their experience provides us with the useful jurisprudence, and we are seeing how they are facing challenges with other countries, or they are going to face these challenges with other countries. Thank you very much for sharing this experience. Which are the difficulties to apply really this equality? Well, that's the core of the matter. Once we have these logics, the difficult part is to achieve the application with the rules that allow it. In the case of Paraguay, we thank Magistrate Cristaldo for her presentation, which shows the concern of the electoral justice of Paraguay to increase the comprehensive character of and including people with disabilities, as well as emphasizing the promotion of participation of women through this innovative initiative, and to provide visibility to women that have conquered these electoral positions, and that the populations get to know these women leaders, and they are accepting these logics of equality. Thank you very much for share with us the beautiful sound of the Guarani dialect, because this gives life to Paraguay. In the case of El Salvador, we would like to thank you for this historical tour, emphasizing what happened after the peace agreements in 1992 and the importance that you provide to the defense of human rights and the mechanisms that you have been exploring and using in order to guarantee an equalitarian participation of women and men in politics. And in an interesting reflection about the minimum quotas, which is a discussion that continues, the debate goes on, and there's such an important concept of right affirmation. This is also the core of the matter of all the equality logics in politics and in democracy. So thank you very much to all of you for these interesting presentations. I would like now to open the forum for 3 comments or questions from the floor, and then we are going to give the floor to our panelists. And if we have time, we are going to open a second round of comments. We have a comment here from Bolivia. We have another from Panama. Any other comments? And Mexico, please. So go ahead, Bolivia. I would like to very briefly mention that there was a confusion that I had, and I sent also a lecture on this topic. So it is available for you if you want to send this presentation to the participants. But summarizing, we have achieved equality in all our legislative bodies, in the municipalities and the departments and the plural national assembly, which is the parliament in the House of Representatives. This is an achievement that is already in place, that is a result of the electoral law, which is called parity or equality and alternance or alternation between the holders and the alternates, men and women. So this is already an achievement. But we still have to continue with the executive powers. We only have 8% of women mayors, and we have a previous background in 1980, Lidia Gayler Tejada, our president. And the important thing is that we have consolidated this even in the institutions, as I was mentioning to you yesterday. But as women get more and more public positions, we also have political harassment, and then to make them leave their positions, there is also violence, political violence that has been proven, and we don't have lots of regulations in order to apply a solution. So I think this has been a progress. We are having a step forward, and we have constituted a body which is made out of women. The first chair of this body was Luciana Lucio. We held a meeting last year, and the current chair is Yolima Carrillo from Colombia, and the vice chair is Katy Uronia from Bolivia. And the next year, we are going to invite and welcome Mexican people and Mexican women and from all the countries that are here. And we are going to give you the date on a timely manner for the invitation that we are proposing to you for the year 2018. Panama, please. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. I would like to share with you Panama's situation. We have a new electoral reform as of the law 29, which is May 29. We have a quota of 20%, and I should admit that we never reached it. We are in the last places regarding equality of gender, and in this law we have a very similar situation in the new article. We increase it to a 50%, and we are asking for the candidates when they are nominated, 50% should be of the nomination should be women. But even though this proposal had a compliance mechanism that if we didn't meet the quota of 50% in these nominations, they were going to be rejected until we reached this quota. Nevertheless, it didn't pass in the assembly, and the norm says that we need to try to get to 50% of the nomination of women. Nevertheless, the next paragraph says that if this is not reached, we need to issue a certification from the Women's Secretariat of the political party proving or evidencing that we were not able to get to this 50%, so we had to continue and doing it with men. So this is kind of not effective because we don't in reality, this is not going to be complied with. The positive thing is that in some internal elections of the political parties last year, we did several ones, and we observed that there were enforcing, even though we didn't have the standard with the 50% in the internal elections, we were trying to comply with this 50% during the nominations. Even more, there were some lawsuits that reached the tribunal, and it was because they were not complying with this quota. And it was interesting to see that the political parties, specifically one, was complying with it, even though the law is not compulsory in this regard. So it was like a principle that they had to comply with the 50% for nominations of women, otherwise the nomination was not going to be received. This is internally for the party, so this was very interesting to me. On the other hand, in 2012, there is a ruling from the Supreme Court of Justice where they tried to declare unconstitutional an article of the Electoral Code speaking of the 30% in the gender quote. And the Supreme Court very wisely responded that was the minimum which was guaranteeing women's participation. So the Supreme Court supported us along these lines because at that moment the 30% was current and not the 50%, but they supported us. And I also would like to tell you that in the Electoral Tribunal this year we created an office, a women's secretariat, to call it so. So we think that this is also some progress and a step forward. So I think that this is an important part, and I would like finally to let you know what Magistrate Yolima Corrillo from Colombia told us within this gender scenario and the quotas. She said that a few days ago there was an organization that has a legal stance, and he had to save the vote because in the directive they were not complying with the gender quota that has been agreed within these peace agreements. So I would like to let you know this situation. So I wanted to share with you this situation because it seemed to me very interesting, always defending the quota and the equality, the gender equality. Thank you very much, Panama. Mexico, please. Thank you very much and good morning. Welcome to all of you and thank you for this opportunity of sharing here with us in this table, with you in this table. Nevertheless, we have some reluctancy to the parity or equality and to acknowledge this opportunity of being candidates or even electoral authorities. But specifically for this case, it seemed to me very interesting the participation of Magistrate Miriam Cristalago, because in Mexico we have also been creating some actions in order to include the disabled people by acknowledging them their electoral and political rights. But specifically, I would like to ask you, Magistrate, how did you set out this vote at home? How in advance you have to make this application? And I would like to ask you if you are also managing the easy reading, because you have contemplated Braille, signs language, audio visual aids, but I don't know if you have the easy reading, because this is not something that we commonly have in order to apply the Marrakesh Treaty regarding the transformation of the texts. So I would like to congratulate Paraguay, first of all. It's a pleasure to see that we are having actions in order to include the disabled people in Latin America. I would also like to ask you, I observed that you have also only one interpreter. Does this interpreter have certain career or what's his background? Because the technical language that we use in our meetings or in the electoral activities, it's not always very well known by the interpreter. And if they do not manage this legal lingo, it's difficult to convey it to people with disabilities. And lastly, Dr. Julio, what do you mean by these responder women? And thank you very much again for letting us know your different visions, and it's good to know that we have topics in common. Before answering these questions, I have Magistrate José Luis Vargas from the Electoral Tribunal in Mexico. Thank you very much, dear Lourdes. I would like to point out with the hugest of pride that Mexico, along these lines, regarding the regulation and the jurisprudence work, has been progressing in the last 10 years in an impressive manner. We used to have a constitutional mandate which set out a quota of 60-40. Afterwards, we went 70-30. And since 2014, our constitution sets forth the compulsory equality for the lists of the parties regarding the representation of local and federal parliaments. Likewise, regarding jurisprudence, the High Chamber has been working around something that has to do not only with guaranteeing this equality, but also to making a substantive participation. I think that nowadays, and I can tell you this with high pride, we have recently voted a ruling where this is even being managed by our country, or being done by our country, in order also to apply this in the directives of the political parties. Why is this important? Well, because undoubtedly those affirmative actions that have a temporary character have to be achieved and have to make tangible in reality. So if we achieve this equality in the political parties and women that are participating in the political parties, then we are going to have natural candidates and they are not going to be artificially made. In the year 2011, Mexico had a very relevant ruling because we already have this system. What we don't have is a mandate that the holder of the political representation has to be of one gender, but we didn't have this imposition that the alternate has to be of the same gender. So they were appointing women, and some months later they fired them so that to give their position to men. So I think that the magistrates, the regional magistrates and the local ones, and of course those of the high chamber have been working very hard in order to achieve all this equality. And finally, I think that Mexico, as well as many Latin American countries, has a deficit regarding the political violence, the gender political violence. Recently, 2 days ago, because Magistrate Monica Soto was going to be here today, and he is not able to attend because of a very severe matter. In the social media, they threatened her, even to kill her. Why? Because of a specific case that we are trying to solve currently. So in the political language and in political actions, it would be very different, and they would give it a little bit of more of thought if it were a man. But as she is a woman, then we have this gender political violence, which evidently we cannot allow. And I would like to share with you this because unfortunately she's not able to be here with us because of that threat. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Magistrate Vargas. Now we are going to give the floor for 3 minutes to each one of our panelists in the same order that you were making your presentations. First, Magistrate Retana from Costa Rica, please. Well, Lourdes was mentioning that it's not enough to approve by the legislation all this gender equality. It's not as easy as that. We have suffered a lot and we have worked very hard. For example, when we had the election for mayors in the not the previous year, but the year before, 90% of the candidates were men. Hence, 90% of women are the vice mayors. And the law states that the vice mayor has the duties that are given by the mayor. And we have found many vice mayors that are complaining because they are given, for example, the work for a secretary. They record the people who goes in and out in the buildings, or they have to go and oversee or see what's happening in the parking lots. They are not given the importance that they should. There is even a vice mayor that has much more experience than the mayor himself. She is a civil engineer with a master's degree in structural engineering. He is very educated, and the mayor is coming from a rural area, and the mayor is really a man without any education or any training. Nevertheless, everyone has been given the order not to obey her if all the if all the actions that they are going to take are not passed first before the major. So we are all subject to this kind of discrimination. That's why we had to interpret the law in such a way that it is really understood, because that's what we want to do in Costa Rica. We have had in last year several corruption cases, and I can proudly tell you that amongst all that were condemned, we haven't had any women in the political position. This is something important to take into consideration. We have to realize that corruption is less in political positions in women. I'm not inventing this. Financial organizations in Costa Rica, for example, all the banks have created banking only for women, because women are 100% subject to credit. We don't like to be debtors, and all these things show us that in reality, the more women we have in the public administration, we are going to have more transparency. Our former president of Costa Rica was mentioning a few days ago in a forum, I know that I made lots of mistakes as a human being, but please do not punish all my gender because of the mistakes that I have made. Women are capable of everything. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Magistrate Ritana. Now we are going to give the floor Magistrate Cristaldo from Paraguay.
Well, to answer Dr. Maria del Carmen, we have within the electoral timeline right now for the elections of that will take place in April 2018. During October, we held the visits that were requested be done within the previous 60 days. That visit is conducted with electoral justice personnel together with a physician sent by the public health ministry, and also a social worker that also comes from the public health ministry, in order to conduct this work, so that since we have a mutual control of all political parties regarding all the activities of electoral justice, so they cannot say we are favoring one or another political sector. This is why they all participate. Now, since this is something that we have just started with, we still don't have the technical sign language. It's just a common sign language for the interpreter that you asked. I hope that we will get to that technical interpreter, technical sign language soon. I would also like to say that for women in our country, we have a very, very low percentage. We have the implementation of quotas in 1 for every 5 in some places, but that's not really translated for the general elections, because it's only done at a local level. Because based on the representation system, since it is cut by the dumb system, we are still a minority. And as we already know, the quota system only favors us in long lists, and since a list of representatives are at a department level, there are not many. So we have a lot of work to do, and we think that, well, actually with Dr. Lourdes, we were working on something, and we have discussed and said that in April we will probably reduce our percentage in parliament, because we have a big issue, because women who are members of parliament, they kind of forget about our cause. There are gender-based or women-based events where they just sit down for 20 minutes, they take 4 pictures, and then they leave. So I think that we have a lot of work to do in my dear Paraguay. Thank you. Thank you, Magistrate Cristaldo. Now Magistrate Olivo from the Tribunal of El Salvador will address the audience. Well, to answer the question of our colleague from Mexico, I would like to tell you that this, the rebellious activity I mentioned, it's a critical position with the struggle struggles of women in our country. And just as an anecdote, I would like to tell you about a lady called Prudencia Ayala. And this lady in 1930, and back then the women didn't have the right to vote, and they didn't have any authorization for the passive vote. She ran for president of the country during the military dictatorships, and she had a social following in my national university, which was quite relevant and quite rebellious, supported her. So women in El Salvador were part of the guerrilla, of the armed struggle, and then she created a group in the parliament. So I think that would be a good example for women, because if you don't have any parliament level association, well, most of them are men also, so it would be difficult to defend those rights. And a proof of that is that the Article 37 of the law, which is now Article 38 actually, is the result of these things I just told you about. I didn't have time to give you this percentage, but I think it would be good. I don't know if you have a majority of women here, but 14 women have been elected in the Central American Parliament out of 20, so it's 35%. 7 women are holders and 7 are alternates. In the case of the Legislative Assembly, 32% of women have been elected. That surpasses the percentage of what that we were talking about before. 27 are holders and 27 are alternates. And in the municipal councils, since we have, well, even though we have 262 municipal councils or boards, we have already 940 women in these municipal councils. After this history of Prudencia Ayala that I told you about, that ran for president when women didn't even have the right to vote. And of course they didn't have the right to be voted or to be elected, but in 1939 they got the right to vote. But there are some concerns. We created gender unit, our electoral tribunal in Salvador. So you, of course, you will understand that we have 30% of women in the collegiate body. We have 10 magistrates, where three women are already have already been elected by the Legislative Assembly, abiding by that 30% quota. But that wasn't enforced when they were elected. So despite this result of the 2015 election, which is a very good result for women, because like our colleague from Paraguay was saying, one thing is saying, okay, you will regulate the internal elections of the political parties where the lists come from. You will regulate that 30% women will be included there, at least. But something very different would be when it comes to enrolling these candidates in the electoral tribunal. And something else is, and this is a very important thing for reflection, because whether it's a woman or a man, usually right now they're voting more for men than for women, even if they're women. So we have to change the. I'm not talking about education. I'm talking about re-education, because we're already educated based on that model, men-based model. So that percentage of women that were elected into the Legislative Assembly that I mentioned before, 54 women, that 27 are holders and 27 are alternates. The Constitutional Assembly. I'm about to wrap this up, because this is important. I think that the Constitutional Chamber issued a ruling that declares as unconstitutional the alternate representatives that have been elected in the Representative Assembly. There are 84, but they have their own reasons. So with this percentage of women, you have 20 27 alternates that had been had won that position due to their struggle. Thank you very much to our panel members. I would like to also thank the participations of the rest of the attendees. So with this, we are concluding this panel exactly at 11:15. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the panel members for their interventions, as well as the presence of Magistrate Vargas and Daniel Sobato. Now we will start with the table of conclusions, but we will first have a 5-minute break to change the structure of the room. Thank you.